Chronicles, Book 1, Chapter 9. The names of all the Israelites were listed in their family histories. Those family histories were put in the book, the history of the kings of Israel. The people in Jerusalem. The people of Judah were made prisoners and forced to go to Babylon. They were taken there because they were not faithful to God. The first people to come back and live in their own lands and towns were some Israelites, priests, Levites, and servants who worked in the temple. These are the people from the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh who lived in Jerusalem. Uzziah was Ammihud's son. Ammihud was Omri's son. Omri was Imri's son. Imri was Bani's son. Bani was a descendant of Perez. Perez was Judah's son. The Shilonites who lived in Jerusalem were Asaiah, the oldest son, and his sons. The Zerahites who lived in Jerusalem were Jeuel and their relatives. There were 690 of them in all. These are the people from the tribe of Benjamin who lived in Jerusalem. Sallu was Meshullam's son. Meshullam was Hodaviah's son. Hodaviah was Hassaniah's son. Ibaniah was Jeroham's son. Elah was Uzzi's son. Uzzi was Mikri's son. And Meshullam was Shaphtiel's son. Shaphtiah was Reel's son. Reel was Ibnahiah's son. The family history of Benjamin shows there were 956 of them living in Jerusalem. All these men were leaders in their families. These are the priests who lived in Jerusalem: Jedediah, Jehorab, Jachin, and Azariah. Azariah was Hilkiah's son. Hilkiah was Meshullam's son. Meshullam was Zadok's son. Zadok was Merioth's son. Merioth's son was Ashtub's son. Ahitub was the important official responsible for God's temple. Also there was Jeroham's son, Adaiah. Jeroham was Pashhur's son. Pashhur was Malchiah's son. And there was Adel's son, Messiah. Adel was Jahazriah's son. Pashhur was Melchah's son. And there was Adel's son, Messiah. Adel was Jahazriah's son. Jazriah was Meshullam's son. Meshullam was Meshillithmith's son. Meshillithmith's son was Emer's son. There were 1,760 priests. They were leaders of their families. They were responsible for the work of the serving in God's temple. These are the people from the tribe of Levi who lived in Jerusalem. Hassab's son, Shemaiah. Hassab was Azrikam's son. Azrikam was Hashabiah's son. Hashabiah was a descendant of Merari. Also living in Jerusalem was Babakbar, Harish, Galal, Mattaniah. Mattaniah was Micah's son. Micah was Zichri's son. Zichri was Asaph's son. Obadiah was Shimei's son. And Shemaiah was Galel's son. Galel was Jehudath's son. Berechiah was Asa's son. Asa was Elkanah's son. Berechiah lived in the small towns near the people of Netophaph. These are the gatekeepers who lived in Jerusalem: Shallum, Akab, Talmon, Ahamin, and their relatives. Shallum was their leader. Now these men stand next to the king's gate on the east side. They were the gatekeepers from the tribe of Levi. Shallum was Korah's son. Korah was Ebasiah's son. Ebasaph was Korah's son. And Shallum and his brothers were gatekeepers. They were from the family of Korah. They had the job of guarding the entrance to the holy tent. They did this just as their ancestors had done before them. Their ancestors had the job of guarding entrance to the area where the Lord lived among the people. In the past, Phinehas was in charge of the gatekeepers. Phinehas was Eleazar's son. The Lord was with Phinehas. Zechariah's son Meshelmiah was the gatekeeper at the entrance to the holy tent. In all, there were 212 men who were chosen to guard the gates of the holy tent. Their names were written in their family histories in their small towns. David and Samuel the seer chose these men because they could be trusted. The gatekeepers and their descendants had the responsibility of guarding the gates of the Lord's house, the holy tent. There were gates on the 4 sides, east, west, north, and south. The gatekeepers' relatives who lived in the small towns had to come and help them at certain times. They came and helped the gatekeepers for 7 days each time. There were 4 gatekeepers who were the leaders of all the gatekeepers. They were the Levites. They had the job of caring for the rooms and treasures in God's temple. They stayed up all night guarding God's temple, and they had the job of opening God's temple every morning. Some of the gatekeepers had the job of caring for the dishes used in the temple services. They counted them when they were brought in. They also counted the dishes when they were taken out. Other gatekeepers were chosen to care for the furniture and the special dishes. They also took care of the flour, wine, oil, incense, and special oil. But it was the priest who had the job of mixing the special oil. There was a Levite named Mattatiah who had the job of baking the bread used for the offerings. Mattatiah was Shallum's oldest son. Shallum was from the Korah family. Some of the gatekeepers who were in the Korah family had the job of preparing the bread put on the table every Sabbath. The Levites, who were singers and leaders of their families, stayed in the rooms at the temple. They did not have to do other work because they were responsible for the work in the temple day and night. Okay. Alexa doesn't work. I'll ask it when I leave the bedroom. All these Levites were leaders of their families. They were listed as leaders in their family histories. They lived in Jerusalem. The family history of King Saul. Jael was Gibeon's father. Jael lived in the town of Gibeon. His wife was named Maacah. Jael's oldest son was Abdon. Other sons were Zur, Kish, Baal, Ner, Nadab, Gedor, Ahio, Zechariah, and Mikloth. Mikloth was Shimeam's father. Jael's family lived near the relatives in Jerusalem. Ner was Kish's father. Kish was Saul's father, and Saul was the father of Jonathan, Malchi, Shau, Abinab, Eshbal. Jonathan's son was Merib-Baal. Merib-Baal was Micah's father. Micah's sons were Pithon, Melech, Teriah, and Ahaz. Ahaz was the father of Jada. Jada was the father of Elmeth, Asmath, and Zimri. Zimri was Mosah's father, and Mosah was the father of Beniah. Raphiah was Beniah's son. Elisah was Rephaim's son, and Azel was Elisah's son. Azel had 6 sons. Their names were Azrikam, Bokeru, Ishmael, Shariah, Obadiah, and Hanan. They were Azel's children. Chapter 10. The death of King Saul. The Philistines fought against the Israelites. The Israelites ran away from the Philistines. Many Israelites were killed on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines continued chasing Saul and his sons. They caught them and killed them. The Philistines killed Saul's sons Jonathan, Amminadab, and Malchi-Shua. The fighting was heavy around Saul. The archers shot Saul with the arrows and wounded him. Then Saul said to the helper who carried his armor, "Pull out your sword and use it to kill me. Then these foreigners will not hurt me and make fun of me when they come." But the helper was afraid. He refused to kill Saul. So Saul used his own sword to kill himself by falling on it. When the helper saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his own sword and died. So Saul and his 3 sons died. All of Saul's family died together. When all the Israelites living in the valley saw that their own army had run away and that Saul and his sons were dead, they left their towns and ran away. Then the Philistines came into the towns and lived in them. The next day the Philistines came to take valuable things from the dead bodies. They found Saul's body and the bodies of his sons on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines took things from Saul's body. They took Saul's head and armor. They sent messengers throughout all their country to tell the news to their false gods and to their people. The Philistines put Saul's armor in the temple of their false gods. They hung Saul's head in the temple of Dagon. All the people living in the town of Jabesh Gilead heard everything the Philistines had done to Saul. All the brave men from Jabesh Gilead went to get the bodies of Saul and his sons. They brought them back to Jabesh Gilead. They buried the bones of Saul and his sons under the large tree in Jabesh. Then they showed their sadness and fasted for 7 days. Saul died because he was not faithful to the Lord. He did not obey the Lord's word. Saul also went to a medium and asked her for advice, instead of asking the Lord. This is why the Lord killed Saul and gave the kingdom to Jesse's son David. Chronicles Chapter 11. David becomes king over Israel. All the Israelites came to David at the town of Hebron. They said to David, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past you led us to war. You led us even though Saul was the king. The Lord said to you, 'David, you will be the shepherd of my people, the Israelites. You will become the leader over my people.'" All the leaders of Israel came to King David at the town of Hebron. David made an agreement with them in Hebron before the Lord. The leaders anointed David. That made him king over Israel. The Lord had promised through Samuel that this would happen. David captures Jerusalem. David and all the Israelites went to the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was called Jebus at that time. The people living in that city were named Jebusites. They said to David, "You cannot get inside our city." But David did defeat them. He took over the fortress of Zion, and it became the city of David. David said, "The one who leads the attack on the Jebusites will become the commander over all my army." So Joab led the attack. He was Uriah's son. Joab became the commander of the army. Then David made his home in the fortress. That is why it is named the City of David. David built the city around for the fort. He built it from the millow to the wall around the city. Joab repaired the other parts of the city. David continued to grow greater, and the Lord all-powerful was with him. The 3 heroes. This is a list of the leaders over David's special soldiers. These heroes became very powerful with David and his kingdom. They and all the Israelites supported David and made him king, just as the Lord had promised. This is a list of David's special soldiers. Jashobeam the Hachmonite was the leader of the king's special forces. Jashobeam used his spear to kill 300 men at one time. Next there was Eleazar, son of Dodiah from Ahoah. Eleazar was one of the 3 heroes. Eleazar was with David at Pashdamim. The Philistines had come to the place to fight a war. There was a field full of barley there. The Israelites ran away from the Philistines, but the 3 heroes stood there in that field and defended it. They defeated the Philistines. The Lord gave the Israelites a great victory. Once David was at the cave of Adullam, and the 3 of the 30 heroes went down to meet him by a rock near the cave. At the same time, the Philistine army was camped in the valley of Rephaim. Another time, David was in the fortress, and a group of Philistine soldiers was stationed in Bethlehem. David was thirsty for some water from his hometown, so he said, "Oh, if only I could have some water from that well by the gate in Bethlehem." So the 3 heroes fought their way through the Philistine army and got some water from near the well near the city gate in Bethlehem. They took it to David, but he refused to drink it. He poured it on the ground as an offering to the Lord. David said, "God, I cannot drink this water. It would be like drinking the blood of the men who risked their lives to get this water for me." That is why David refused to drink the water. The three heroes did many brave things like that.